So, hi guys, we'll be starting with vicarious and state liability right now. First of all, vicarious का मतलब क्या हुआ? Vicarious का मतलब ये हुआ, हाँ लिख देता हूँ. It means the one who performs for another, right? दो maxims है इसके major, two maxims which are the major things under vicarious liability. They are first, respondent superior, and second is Q facit per alium facit per se. Q facit per alium facit per se, right? रिस्पोंडेंट सुपीरियर का कहां से हुआ? इलेबोरेशन. प्रिंसिपल मस्ट आंसर फॉर द एक्शन ऑफ सबऑर्डिनेट. प्रिंसिपल मस्ट आंसर फॉर whom? द सबऑर्डिनेट. क्यू फेसित पेरिलियम फेसित पर से का मतलब क्या हुआ? ही हु एम्प्लॉयज अनदर पर्सन टू डू समथिंग डज इट हिमसेल्फ. ही हु एम्प्लॉयज another person to do something does it himself. राइट, इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट. ये बेसिक्स थे, इसके बाद हम आगे चलते हैं. यहाँ पे भी यही लिखा गया है, रिस्पोंडेंट सुपीरियर और क्यू फेसित पेरिलियम फेसित पर से का कॉन्सेप्ट. Vicarious liability arises due to the relationship between the employee and his superior. It is based on the maxim respondent superior and Q facet perillium facet per se. There are majorly three ways under which vicarious liability arises. First is what? The ratification. एक मिनट. Ratification by the superior to become responsible to an act. ठीक है, अगर सुपीरियर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी क्रिएट कर रहा है थ्रू रेटिफाइंग तो वो आएगा. सेकेंड इज देर इज अ स्पेशल रिलेशनशिप, देर इज अ मास्टर एंड सर्वेंट रिलेशनशिप और ओनर एंड इंडिपेंडेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्टर. मास्टर सर्वेंट, ओनर एंड इंडिपेंडेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्टर इन सर्टेन केसेस एंड प्रिंसिपल एजेंट और इफ देर इज अ पार्टनरशिप. ठीक है, प्रिंसिपल एजेंट का कहां पे प्रोस्पेक्ट आएगा? When the principal expressly or impliedly authorizes some act to be done, he is liable for such an act of the agent if the same has been done in the course of his duties as an agent. सेकेंड, अगर पार्टनर का कॉन्सेप्ट आ रहा है, द रिलेशन बिटवीन पार्टनर्स इंटर से is understood to be that of principal and agent, and each partner is therefore liable to third persons for the neglect and fraud of his fellow partners. The liability of each partner is joint and several. ठीक है. Thirdly, master and servant. The master is liable for the tort committed by a servant acting in the course of his employment. The servant is eventually also liable. Right. थर्ड इज व्हाट? द अबेटमेंट टू टॉट. अगर टॉट में अबेट कर रहा है तो वाइगेरियस लाइबिलिटी की लाइबिलिटी इसके अंतर्गत आएगी. नेक्स्ट, प्रिंसिपल्स विच गवर्न वाइगेरियस लाइबिलिटी. दे आर रिस्पोंडेंट सुपीरियर, जो मैंने आपको बताया भी. लेट द सुपीरियर रिस्पॉन्ड, इसका मतलब ये हुआ इट इज द लीगल प्रिजम्पशन. द लीगल प्रिजम्पशन इज दैट all acts done by the servant in his master's service are done through his master's express or implied authority. यहाँ पे हमें डिफरेंस देखना होगा. सबसे पहले एक्सप्रेस और इम्प्लाइड अथॉरिटी का क्या होता है. देयर आर अ फ्यू रीजंस फॉर दिस. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, द डीप पॉकेट थ्योरी, जो मैंने आपको पिछली क्लास में भी समझाई है कि हमारे मास्टर के पास कितना पैसा है अपनी जेब में, राइट. देन द मास्टर इज बेटर प्लेस्ड टू कॉम्पनसेट द विक्टिम. ऑफ कोर्स, vicarious liability encourages the master to have due regard for the safety of others and be more careful while employing a servant. देखिए, एक ड्यू डिलिजेंस मास्टर को ही करनी होती है इवेंचुअली, अगर किसी को एम्प्लॉय कर रहा है वो. Thirdly, as the master makes a profit from the acts of his servants, he should also bear any losses. That is also one more prospect. Then, Q facet per alium facet per se. तो concept है, right? He who doesn't act through another does it himself. मैंने आपको यही बताया अभी इससे पहले. The maxim makes it clear that the nomenclature is immaterial and what is of consequence is the performance of a function by the agent servant for the benefit of principal and master. ठीक है? A person who puts another in his place to do an act in his absence n- necessarily delegated in him the authority to determine when and how the act is to be done. ठीक है? वही है, कहीं ना कहीं सुपियोरिटी का प्रिंसिपल क्यू फेसित पर एलियम फेसित पर से में भी आता ही है. कंडीशंस क्या क्या है फॉर मास्टर्स फॉर vicarious liability? First, existence of master servant relationship. A servant is one who voluntarily agrees to subject himself to the lawful orders and directions of another in respect of certain work, with or without consideration. Without consideration is important. कभी कभी विदाउट कंसिडरेशन भी एक मास्टर सर्वेंट रिलेशनशिप क्रिएट हो जाती है, राइट? टेस्ट क्या क्या है मास्टर सर्वेंट रिलेशनशिप के, अब हम ये देखते हैं. पहला टेस्ट है टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल. प्रिंसिपल मास्टर एम्प्लॉयर इज लायबल इफ ही जस्ट अ सेकेंड यार, इसका साइड से कट गया, गिव मी अ मिनट. सॉरी फॉर दिस गाइस, जस्ट गिव मी अ सेकेंड. वी आर डूइंग वाइकेरियस लायबिलिटी. इसमें तो आ ही नहीं रहा है. यस. So first of all is the test of control. Principal master employer is liable if he can order or require what is to be done and how. Thus, independent contractors cannot claim vicarious liability since the principal does not have the control over contractor's working style. ठीक है, कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स वर्किंग स्टाइल क्योंकि प्रिंसिपल के पास नहीं होता है. एक केस है कैसिडी वर्सेस मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ हेल्थ का केस है, right? It was held that this was not the correct test. The ministry did not give explicit instructions to the surgeon on how to perform an operation, but was nonetheless held responsible for the negligence while performing it, right? This was one thing. Second, it is the nature of employment which can determine the master servant relationship. If it is a contract of service employment or it is a contract of services employment, right? देखिए, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ऑफ सर्विसेज और कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ऑफ सर्विस, इसका डिफरेंस क्रिएट हो रहा है. एक एम्प्लॉयमेंट होती है और एक होता है इंडिपेंडेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्टर. मैं इसका बनाता हूँ यहाँ पे. ठीक है, सर्विस और सर्विसेज, राइट? कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ऑफ सर्विस और कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ऑफ सर्विसेज. कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ऑफ सर्विस में बेसिकली इट इज एन एम्प्लॉयमेंट. सेकेंडली, सर्विसेज में इट इज एन इंडिपेंडेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्टर. इंडिपेंडेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्टर. ठीक है, कॉन्ट्रैक्टर, राइट? Formal is considered to be a part of business of the employer. It is a part of business of the employer, right? Second is the later is considered as the outsourcing of services. It is the outsourcing of services. That is the basic difference. Third is what? The hire and fire test. If a person has the ability to employ, pay, and discharge another to the exclusion of other employers, to the exclusion of other employers. Important to understand that, right? Now, we'll move on to the next prospect, which is the liability of an independent contractor. Important to understand that as well, right? The employer may be liable for the acts done by the independent contractor if the employer authorizes the doing of an improper act or tort. Example, telling a taxi driver to drive fast, और subsequent ratification, और thirdly strict liability. Strict liability का कॉन्सेप्ट कहाँ पे पढ़ा था हमने? राइलेंस वर्सेस फ्लेचर में. बर्गेस वर्सेस ग्रे का एक केस है. इस केस में if the master interferes in the work being done by the independent contractor or instructs to him to do it in a certain way, he must bear the consequences of his negligence. देखिए, अब जो गलत काम जिसने किया वही उसकी consequences को bear करेगा. Next, over time there has been a move away from the test of control to the higher fair test to decide whether a person is a servant or an independent contractor. This has broadened the scope of servant to include captain of a ship or a surgeon at a hospital. Secondly, the course of employment. It is to not to be merely coincidental in time, but should be incidental to the performance of the duties assigned. This includes the performance of an authorized act or a way or a wrong way of doing such authorized act. Master is liable for the authorized act eventually, even if it is done negligently, intentionally, even contrary to express orders or fraudulently. ठीक है. Lloyd versus Clay Smith and Company का केस है. A clerk which was acting in course of the business defrauded a client into transforming a property in his own name. The defendant was held liable as the agent was acting in course of the performance of his duties as an agent. Right? अब ये भी दिक्कतें आ सकती हैं. Next, Maharashtra versus Kanchanmala Singh. A servant sent to make some purchases utter some defamatory words there. This was not deemed to be in course of employment. The wrongful act was not intimately connected to the performance of the duty as to be a wrong way of doing the authorized act. Right? Important to understand that. Roberts versus Shanks. इस केस में क्या हुआ हम ये देखते हैं. P got off the car and instructed his driver to take back to the garage. D first took it to his own house, and while driving from there to the garage had a road accident. It was held that P was liable since the accident happened during the course of employment as D was taking the car back to the garage as instructed by the employer. Beard versus London General Omnibus. At the end of a journey, the driver stopped to take his meal. To save time for the next trip, the conductor in the meantime decided to turn it around and negligently caused an accident. It was held that when the servant's act is altogether different from what was authorized by the master, the act is outside the course of employment. ये ध्यान रखना है कि ये outside the course of employment का एक केस है. ठीक है. However, if the servant negligently delegates his duty to another person and the other person performs the same negligently, the master will still be liable. अगर सर्वेंट ने भी डेलीगेट कर दिया अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी तब भी मास्टर ही लायबल होगा. इस बात का ध्यान रखना है. राइट. Example, in the above case, if the driver had authorized the conductor of the bus to turn it around for the next trip. Simple example set करते हुए मैंने आपको ये बता दिया है. However, in India, the Motor Vehicles Act deems these acts to be falling under strict liability incorporated therein. इंडिया का प्रोस्पेक्ट यही है कि it will be under strict liability. Thus, the owner of the vehicle would in any case be liable and would in turn be reimbursed by mandatorily obtained insurance cover. ठीक है. Second, we'll be studying about state liability now, right, in the next class. I hope you enjoyed this class. Tell me if you need any updates or anything changed in the classes. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day ahead. Bye.